every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
You need the right people in the right place at the right time. And sometimes you have the right people in the right place, but at the wrong time.
I've got to keep going forward. I've got to keep looking for revenue streams. I've got to keep looking for growth, keep looking at new ways of doing things.
But, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development program I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk.
Hello, I'm Granger Forson, and on this week's episode of ScaleUp Radio, I'm speaking to the founder and owner of Alice Violet Creative. It's a business that is a content marketing agency, along with being a strategic marketing consultancy, which covers social media, videography, and podcast production. Alice is a solo entrepreneur and started the business last year, but as you'll hear, she definitely has ambitions to grow in the coming months and years. Our conversation covers her history, how she did what she did, but also covers a lot of ground, including if you must go niche, do it on your services rather than your ideal client. Going with your gut is all well and good in some instances, but don't ignore the data. Spend some time looking at what the statistics say about your industry and the way it's moving. Make better use of your spare time during the working day. If there's no direct client work to do, see this as a chance to work on the business. It's also refreshing to hear just how ambitious Alice is and how well she's planned out the next stage of her business growth. Don't worry if you're not in the marketing or podcasting industry. There's still a lot of practical advice for business owners. So let's go over and hear from Alice. So, hello, Alice Violet, and welcome to ScaleUp Radio. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, Granger. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so usually I'm the one behind the mic in terms of like behind the scenes of doing podcast production and editing and distribution. So it's a nice excuse to get my mic out and be speaking. So I own Alice Violet Creative, which is a content marketing agency. And we also do strategic consultancy. So everything from social media to videography, podcast production, photography. But also I do things like training and sort of digital marketing consultancy as well.
Excellent. Wow. Lots of bits and pieces. So let's explore some of those as we go through. So give us a size. How big is your business? How long have you been operating?
So at the moment, it's just me. So I started last year in January 2021. So we're still fairly new business, but I often do collaborate with others. So I've got quite a big network of people that I collaborate with when I need to. And also I deliver a lot of the service myself at the moment, but I think I'm at quite an interesting point in my business now where I need to start thinking about hiring. Well, I am thinking about hiring so that I can actually grow the business to become a bit bigger. So it's exciting times.
So you've got podcasting, social media, strategy. So give us a background. Where did you come from? What got you to this point of deciding in 21 to start your business?
Yeah, sure. So my background is quite varied, actually, which is probably why I've got quite a varied service menu now. So I started in travel industry, and then more recently I worked in tech. But when I was in travel, it was specifically luxury travel, and then tech was specifically cybersecurity. So they are polar opposites of each other. And when I was in luxury travel, I was primarily doing social media. And this is back when it was sort of a brand new medium. And I built two of the biggest luxury travel brands from scratch at the time. And it was kind of focused on content marketing. So a lot of videography, photography. I traveled to Kenya, India, the US to get content. And also I trained all of their staff in the US and the UK on photography because we all traveled a lot. That's kind of a perk of being in the industry. And so I thought it was a great opportunity for them all to be trained on getting content that we could share. And also a lot of writing and things like that while I was there. And then I moved into cybersecurity because I was offered a job there. And to be honest, it was, a big step up. And I just thought, let's try something different. And when I got there, I wasn't sure that I was going to be there for very long. I thought it was just going to be a break, try something different, learn some new skills and go back to travel. But actually, it was a really, really interesting role because of how different it was. So whereas in luxury travel, I've been very reliant on content, in cybersecurity, there really isn't anything visual to be using. So it really had to use my skills in a very different way to be making content when there's nothing visual to show. So that's when I became a podcast producer for the Naked Security podcast, which was a really successful show. Went from about 3,000 listens a month to about 60 by adding in proper mics, changing up the show format, getting regular guests on and doing specials. And so primarily they'd be using things like Twitter, which again are very text-based. They were a news website. It was a very educational format. So really, really different to travel. And that made it a big challenge when I eventually launched my own business because they're so different. How do I communicate that I have this really different background? So I launched the business because basically it was the pandemic and I was working as a director for a agency in Cheltenham at the time as social media director with a team of people working in luxury hotels. And it just wasn't a good time to be in the industry, but it didn't feel like a safe time to change roles either. And so I felt like I didn't really know what to do. I had this really varied background in terms of cybersecurity. Do I want to go back there where it's safer? But actually, I'm more interested in the luxury side of things. So I decided to take a risk and launch my business.
Excellent. So take us through some of these elements of your business. So podcasting, how do you help your clients with podcasting?
So in terms of podcasting, I help with everything from consultancy in terms of looking at your existing show, if you've got one, or your existing marketing platforms like your website, your social media, your email newsletter, and seeing if there is the opportunity for a podcast and what that could look like and what the show could be. Audit all of it and kind of either come up with the concept or improvements based on what you've already got. Then we'd look at training. So training who's going to be the host on how to be confident on the mic, which don't judge me too harshly for because I'm a producer, not a host. And also training potentially someone in-house to edit it, unless that's going to be me going forward. Finding guests with big audiences to help the promotion of the show. Then I'll actually sit in on the show, help you record it, prep the guests beforehand, and then edit it, distribute it across all the audio networks. And then I would also share with your promotion strategy for social media. Sometimes we also record the video version of it. So I'd create videos with subtitles for YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, just for extra promotion as well. So really end-to-end podcasting.
Excellent. Wow. Huge amounts. Maybe you can give us a bit of advice once we've finished this one.
Yeah, maybe I can coach you today.
And so you also then mentioned social media and content management. So what do you do for your clients in terms of helping them there?
So in all honesty, when it comes to social media, although this is probably my foundational skill, this is the remit I've been in the longest. This is actually the remit I don't do a huge amount of work in for my clients because it's so time consuming. So I tend to focus on content production. So that's one of the reasons I want to hire somebody, because then they can be the actual manager and I would be the sort of strategic overview and I would proofread the content and come up with the campaigns and help you analyze success and things like that. But in terms of someone actually writing and scheduling your content, that's too time consuming for me to be able to do that bit. So I primarily would be training your in-house team and being a kind of person that they can meet with on a weekly or monthly basis at the moment and review success. I might also create videos or edit videos, but I don't do the sort of full management side of things. But hopefully we'll be able to offer that this year because I do get a lot of leads for that and I just can't deliver the service on that side.
Okay. Quite a mix of different types of activity for clients in terms of their marketing and thinking. So who's an ideal customer for you currently, and where are you sort of trying to go with your customer base?
Well, interestingly, I'd say one of my biggest challenges in year one was niching, because obviously I have this background in marketing, and all of the advice as a business is to niche into a specific area. But actually, that was really challenging for me, because if I niched on one side, which I did, first I niched to luxury travel, and I'd get lots of leads from tech brands saying, oh, we'd love to work with you, but are you not doing tech anymore? And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to niche to tech because the travel industry is still a bit unstable. And then I'd get lots of interior designers, even just friends of mine, travel brands, contact me and saying, we'd love to do a photo shoot, or we'd love to have some training, but actually, are you only working with tech now? So I don't niche. Actually, I'm very open, which lots of people might say is risky, but I found that I'm more successful that way. It does make communicating who my target audience is more difficult, but I tend to focus on what your problem is. Do you need to create beautiful, compelling content? Even if you're a cybersecurity brand or a non-visual brand, we can still make beautiful content and memorable strategic content. Or are you a luxury travel brand who needs me to train your team on how to take their own video that we can then edit, instead of sending someone like me to Kenya for a week, which would be very expensive? So it's more about the service that I offer versus who the company is.
So you've niched on your services rather than specific clients.
Exactly. Yeah, I have.
Yes. Yeah. So as you've gone through that journey over the last year in terms of doing that, has your customer base changed significantly? Because you said you've gone from one to another. And has that then driven your decision on your specific services, or is it just an opportunity that came along and you jumped onto it and that's then giving you ideas? So did you plan this, or did it sort of just evolve?
I kind of planned it. I mean, each time I niched, I was very, putting all my eggs in one basket, and would have a whole rebrand and do some kind of paid advertising on social media and Google, and really kind of go for that specific audience. And so then when I was getting leads that I wasn't actively targeting from the other side, that's when I made the decision that I shouldn't niche, because I'm losing out on free opportunities by being very strategic in one. So that's how that's evolved. In terms of I've definitely worked with clients that I would have never worked with before. So interior designers is an interesting niche that's coming up, just doing things like photo shoots for them. And, brands that aren't luxury travel, but might be luxury, I've started working with. And also an area that I'm really interested in just on a personal level is actually the arts. So I love ballet, I love art galleries, I love exhibitions. And this is an area that I would really love to go into. And that work that I do on the luxury side definitely attracts that type of client. So I would say that actually, although luxury and lifestyle brands are more interesting to me, they actually have not as big budgets. And so whereas the tech brands have much bigger budgets, they've got much more opportunity to do big creative projects with them. And so, to be honest, it just depends what people are looking for. I'm open to both because I enjoy both, but obviously one of them is more of a business opportunity.
Right. And in terms of your skill base and your services, is it a competitive marketplace? Are there lots of people that do that, or?
I would say in social media, it's very, very competitive, because there's a lot of people who don't have a strategic background, but have used social media their whole lives because we've grown up with it. And I also think that a lot of businesses don't see it as a strategic skill set because we all have an Instagram account. They fail to recognize that business for social is very different to posting your picture of your dog on a Saturday. And so I think that it's one of the reasons I haven't really niched in that area, because although I have extensive experience there, people aren't willing to pay a huge amount for social media because there's 10,000 people who can do it cheaply, not necessarily well, but they'd be who I'm sort of pitching against. Whereas when it comes to podcasting, this is a technical skill set. It involves expensive software, knowing about microphones. I've worked with massive brands doing their podcasts, so I have a really strong portfolio. So when someone approaches me for that, generally that's going to convert. So I would say that it's less competitive in that respect. And probably the same for video. I've got expensive cameras and lighting and tripods and everything. And again, it's hard for people to compete with me in that space.
Interesting. And you've been in the industry for a number of years in terms of podcasting and videoing, and now trying to turn it into a business in terms of helping your clients. Is the marketplace changing? What are the sort of trends that you see taking place? Is the industry from one client to another changing, or is it still the same as it was a few years ago?
I think I would like to see more of a change in the luxury lifestyle brands than I am seeing. I think there's a shift in terms of the market generally. So more marketers and more big brands are looking at data in terms of driving their content strategy. So if you're going to create videos or blogs, for example, you'd be looking at Google data and website data on what are people actually searching for, and then making content to answer those questions on Google. What are people searching for on YouTube, and then making videos to answer those questions, or putting the title in your podcast of the things people are actively searching for. I think tech brands do that really, really well. So when you're pitching to a tech brand, they already expect you to have that level of knowledge about data-driven content. Whereas I think when it comes to luxury lifestyle brands, they just want nice photos and a fun podcast, and they're less strategic, which means you have to educate them on the value of that side of it, which they don't necessarily know or even seek.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So the use of data to make your marketing more strategic and focused in terms of what you're doing, regardless of sort of the brands that you are. Yeah, interesting. Good. So you talked about starting a business, the pandemic and everything else during that time period. So take us about what's been happening over the last year or so in terms of your development.
Well, I think I wasted a lot of time because I was on my own. So I live on my own, and I started my business from home. And so I didn't have anyone around me to sort of bounce ideas off. I just sort of took in a lot of content, bought loads of books, spent loads of money on courses and things that I probably didn't need to. And I think I wasted a lot of time. So I did actually build an entire course last year, a social media foundations course. I recorded it during lockdown, built a website, spent a huge amount of money on kit and everything, filming it, recording it, building it, probably spent 3 months on it. And then when lockdown ended, I just hated it because I felt like it looked really amateur. I should have recorded it in a studio. And given my background, it just didn't fly, that it didn't look good. It needed to be professional, otherwise it undermined my experience as a videographer. But because I'd filmed it at home and I'd done it on my own, I felt like I wasted time. So that was something that I suppose you have to get through in your first year. You have to make mistakes and you have to fail. And a lot of what I've been reading is that, failure is part of the journey and you will fail constantly. It's not about one success. It's about constant failures and success. And I've definitely learned that. And I think I did waste a lot of time in the first year on things that I haven't used.
So you talked about the failures in terms of doing that. Those things you've changed, and anything else that went right?
So in terms of things that went right, I think I've been really lucky in that I'm quite well connected. I've worked for lots of global companies. And so a huge amount of my leads come from people I've either worked with who've been made redundant and started their own business, or have gone on to have moved. There's been a lot of people in my network move roles in the last 2 years. So they're now in new teams and outsourcing their podcast, or they're heads of teams and have now had to let go of their marketing department due to budgets. They're outsourcing to me. And so that was a great opportunity for me. And I've definitely been lucky in that respect of not having to do a huge amount of marketing because they're people that I already know. And now I feel like I learned a lot of really valuable lessons in terms of pricing, boundaries, through the people that I already knew, that now when I'm, actually advertising to people who I have no connection with, I'm in a much stronger position because I've had a really great practice run with people I already knew.
Right. So you've through your known network, you've been experimenting with your pricing structures. So now in your non-known network, as you start to do that, you've learned that in terms
Absolutely.
of what's gonna work. Excellent.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, because when it's people that you already know, sometimes they'll actually say to me, I think you can put your price higher. So when I'll send them a proposal, because it might be a friend of mine who's pitching on behalf of their company, they'll say, actually, the people you're pitching against are more expensive and we want to go with you. And I don't think if you're pitching to anonymous people, they'd tell you that. And so it actually was, in terms of my pricing, it made me more confident to be pitching higher.
Okay. So any other successes recently in terms of, how you're going to market and what you're achieving?
In terms of successes, I think I've been looking at the kind of industries that I want to work with and approaching them directly. So in the past, as I said, I've really relied on my network, and I would never have cold called anybody or kind of just approached them out of the blue. But actually recently I have approached someone who I won't name yet, but it's a really exciting project, who I actually saw as a customer and just loved their brand, loved everything they were doing, and thought that they had a really good opportunity for a podcast. So I approached them, just sent an email directly to the CEO saying about who I was and what the opportunity was, and had a call with them. And it's been a really positive reaction. And that's probably inspired me to kind of put myself out there directly, whereas I would never have done that before. I'd have felt really salesy. And also I think I'd have been too scared of rejection. Whereas now I feel like even if they had rejected me, it was such a good opportunity that I wanted to do it.
Excellent. I like that. Yes, it's the fear of rejection really does stop people from trying. Where actually, there's lots of phrases of, you need 100 no's to get one yes, and these sort of things. But it's still very hard to make that first step in terms of doing things.
It's very hard.
So you're working on your own at the moment, and as you said, lots of things you've tried and some things have failed. How do you manage your time, and how do you not get overwhelmed with everything you need to do?
Well, I think that is actually definitely something that is a challenge in terms of managing time. But I have retainers, and when I have a retained client, I try and set aside time for them each month. So a set amount of hours, and always make sure I've got that time free for them. And if they end up not needing me for all of that time that month, then I try and allocate that to my own marketing and my own business admin. So things like accounting, I have an accountant, but I still have to, do all of that boring side of things. It takes up a huge amount of time. And so when I get spare time from a client that doesn't need me as much that month, that's when I'll allocate it to my own business. Whereas I think last year, if a client hadn't needed me, I might have taken a nap or gone for a walk or had the day off, gone and got my nails done. Whereas now I think, okay, I'm finishing at 5 p.m. So if it's only 3 and I've got 2 hours spare, then I can do my accounts, or I can make a reel for Instagram, or I can make some calls to some prospective leads. So I'm being more sort of, the day is a work day, even if I haven't got client work.
Excellent. Okay, that's some really good advice in terms of how to use the spare time. Be ready for it rather than go off and do things. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah, really good advice in terms of doing that. So, you're talking about hiring your first person now in terms of bringing into the business. Really exciting time. So how have you gone about recruiting? Have you thought about that yet in terms of what's going to be your approach to recruitment?
I have. So I put a post on LinkedIn. I think I made like a job advert on LinkedIn, and I was inundated with replies. I think I got over 100 applicants and so many direct messages, emails. And I wasn't prepared for that. And I had a really busy week. So I work in London a lot, and I'm constantly on the train or traveling backwards and forwards. And actually that is an example of bad time management, because I haven't had enough time to look at them. And even though some of them sound amazing, because there were so many, I feel like I want to look at all of them just to check there's not someone incredible in there who lives around the corner. So I'm kind of just taking my time going through applications and finding someone. It is going to be a freelance role to begin with, probably 2 days a week. And then my goal would be to get them to 5 days a week working on my stuff and my client work, and then bring people in-house. So it is a more expensive way of hiring, but because I'm, a small business, it seems less risky and safer option right now. So that's kind of where I am with that at the moment.
And when they start working for you, have you thought about how you go about ensuring that the right things are getting done?
Yeah, I mean, I've managed people before, and generally I think I'm a good judge of character in terms of being able to hire someone who is sort of a self-starter. And also last year, I was a consultant for a company in America for about 6 months. And so I kind of worked in-house for them in a way, but remotely. And everybody who worked for them was remote. People were based all around the States, all around the world, and everyone was sort of very engaged. And they had some really great ways of doing that with regular meetings, regular check-ins, shared documents. And it was actually surprisingly effective. And I think that was great inspiration for me on how I would run things. And also, I'm not a domineering manager. I'm quite an open-minded person. And so hopefully, if you have a great working relationship with somebody, they respect you, they understand that it's a small business. I can't afford for them being paid and not doing the work. So hopefully we'd have a relationship where they would just be accountable, hopefully.
It's fascinating. Just want to go back then in terms of this company you're doing some consulting work with, everybody was online in terms of, it's the holy grail, isn't it? In terms of, having motivated people online. Maybe just share a few examples. You talked about meetings and check-ins and stuff. How do you think that culture worked? What was good about it and how did it work?
So I don't know whether to name them or not. I suppose I am celebrating them, so maybe I should. It was called Food Fight Studios in Florida. And they are an animations company who do sort of lots of animations and web design for podcasters, but also they were branching into tech brands at that time, which is why I was working with them. And they had regular meetings probably every Monday. I think they had a meeting every day, but I didn't attend every day. I'd go on maybe a Monday and a Friday. And Monday was sort of what we were doing last week and what we're doing this week. And there was a shared document and everything was accountable on there of who was doing what. Everyone got a chance to speak. And then on Friday, it was more of a kind of social and celebration. And that really built rapport and made everybody connect with each other and like each other. And even though I didn't meet some of these people, I felt like I knew them as colleagues because we had this social time and also this regular accountability business time. And also they had Google Docs, which were project binders for every client. And actually I now have that. So I've got an accountancy project binder for my accountant. I've got my own one for my own business. And then every client has a Google Doc project binder. And when I get on a call with them, any Zoom call, I put notes on that Google Doc so they can always see what we've discussed and what the next steps are and what the accountability for either of us are. And I would definitely carry that forward into whoever I hired.
Oh, that's really interesting because that's some of the stuff that we promote and ask our clients to really put in place is that structure of meetings. We call it the business rhythm. And often that's with face-to-face companies, but it just shows that actually the business rhythm works just as well in the virtual space with people all across the world in terms of doing stuff. Well, fascinating. Thank you for that in terms of doing things. Right. You were talking about accountants. So how do you keep on top of cash? Cash is so important for a small business when it's growing and scaling. So how do you manage cash?
Well, I don't have a huge amount of expenses. So in my first year, I bought a lot of kit. So I bought microphones, cameras, lights, all of that great stuff. I was actually given a really high-spec MacBook Pro from the tech company when I left. And so I already had that in place. And in terms of my ongoing expenses, all I really have is my train ticket, things like the Adobe Creative Cloud, Dropbox, Zoom. Like it's very small level of expenses and obviously my pay. And so actually I had a meeting with my accountant this morning and the cash flow is really healthy because income is really healthy and outgoings are very small. And so it's not been much of a challenge for me because I don't have a lot to pay for.
Yeah, good. Yeah, keeping those expenses small is the key in terms of all that. Brilliant. Yeah. So let's explore a little bit more in terms of then the other pillar in terms of strategies. So what works for you in terms of marketing now? So you've talked originally about your wider network that you had from your previous roles. What sort of things are you trying to do now and what's successful for you?
So one of the things that I really want to do, I'm in the middle of redoing my website entirely using WordPress because I made my initial website on Wix and I think it was fine for the time, but now I want to be much more strategic with my website and I'd like to make landing pages for every service. So for podcasts, social media, training, consultancy, and then, make sure I've got SEO keywords on all of it and also do probably some Google ads because I did do Google ads last year and got some great leads from that, although it's very expensive. So if I could do more organic Google stuff with my website, that would be great. Also, social media has actually been a massive lead generation tool for me, but generally smaller businesses. So LinkedIn is primarily my network, so that's great. But Instagram was always smaller companies who just wanted a photo shoot or some training. And so they're kind of smaller. And I haven't put as much effort into that over the last month just due to time. And that's what my new person will hopefully be running, is my own social media. And actually, I would love to make a course. So I alluded to the course I made last year, the Social Media Foundations course that I fell out of love with. But actually, if I could make videos that are my training but not delivered live, then it's more cost effective for small companies to be able to buy that off my website directly, then have to schedule time with me to deliver it to them. So I'd like to be making some kind of paid content on my website or a members area or something that people can subscribe to and get cost-effective content if they're a small company. So along with that, I would also need to be making free versions for YouTube and stuff to really showcase that the content is of value. So there's a huge amount to be done. It just comes down to time, I think.
Yes, that's a really important thing that none of us have enough of.
No, exactly.
Very much so. So let's pick on the podcasting industry for now, rather than the social media discussion. So what do you like most about the podcasting industry, and what do you do?
One of the things I love about podcasting is that in every other aspect of content marketing, you're talking to a marketer. So it might be a blog, and the marketer has interviewed a specialist and written up an article for PR or for the website. Or it might be social media, where it's gone through a social media team who've written the article, whatever, the tweet, the Instagram post. Whereas when it's a podcast, you're talking directly to the specialist. So if you are a medical specialist, for example, I did some training with the King's Fund. They have their researchers going straight onto the mic and talking about what's happening in healthcare right now. And the host is also a specialist, or the host might be a marketer, but the guests are always actually these specialists. And it was the same when I worked in cybersecurity. Me or my manager was often the host, and then you'd have a dark web specialist or some really interesting people would come on and talk about the topics in depth. And I think that's a really amazing opportunity for brands to talk directly to their audience, basically. So I think that's one of the biggest value propositions of a podcast, and also the long form content. Imagine if this was on Instagram, we'd have spoken for 1 minute. And it would have been the most juicy bit to just get people to keep watching it. Whereas you can really sit down and enjoy a podcast. And quite often people actually will carve time out of their day every week to listen to a particular show. And so you've got their undivided attention, even if they're driving or cleaning or cooking, they are sitting down with you to listen to your show. And that's really valuable.
Yes, I think lots of people, including myself, listen to podcasts when I call net time. So it's always doing that. You're doing something else, which you can do robotically, but you listen to a podcast in terms of doing that, and you've got a specialist in your ear. Yeah, it's a very interesting thought. I had never thought about it in terms of that. That's great. So what frustrates you about the industry? What would you like to change?
Ooh, I think one of the things that's a challenge for people who want to make a podcast is that they forget how vital the promotion element of it is. So quite often they'll bring me in to do an audit of their existing show. We'll put in new mics, we'll train the hosts, we'll get some great guests scheduled in, we'll make the show, edit it, sounds incredible, put it on SoundCloud, and then they don't publish it. So they don't put a blog on their website, send an email to their newsletter, put it on Twitter, mention it again on Twitter, mention it again on Twitter, put it on YouTube, put it on LinkedIn, mention it again on LinkedIn. They're not doing all of that promotion. And so they've just whacked it on SoundCloud. One of the hosts has posted it on their personal Instagram. And then they say, oh, no one's listening to our show. And it's because they don't know that it exists. So the promotion part of it is as important as the actual show.
And is that because people are not really sort of, trained in terms of thinking about that? Or is there a degree of simplification and automation? Or, is there something there to put a dink in the world of podcasting?
Well, I think podcasting in itself is incredibly time consuming. Editing the show, for example, takes a really long time. Putting it on the audio networks. I mean, you put it on SoundCloud and it's distributed, but it's still a step. putting in the title, the metadata, the tags, everything. It all just takes time. And I think I'm quite rare in that I'm actually a marketer, whereas a lot of podcast producers wouldn't be marketers. So they wouldn't even be thinking about that. Their role is just to edit your show, put it on SoundCloud, and then they'll speak to you next time you send them some content to edit, or they'll be on the call with you recording the show. Whereas for me, because of my background, I'm sort of like, okay, but where are you putting it? Have you got a structure in place? Have you got a strategy in place? But most people wouldn't be expecting me to ask those questions because I'm just the podcast producer.
So you've got something there in terms of an opportunity to add more value in terms of the process, in terms of doing. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and is there something that can develop on and grow, do you think, in terms of that dual role? I like that. You're a marketing person who develops podcasts rather than a podcast technician.
I hope so. I mean, I hope that's the case with all of my services. In terms of social media, I'm also kind of a digital marketer, not just a social media marketer. And it's the same with videography or photography. I won't just edit your photos and send them back. I'll then be talking about which ones would be great for Instagram, and should we film some reels, and which ones you're using on your website. I'm very conscious of the platform it's actually going to be used for. So yeah, I think that's probably key to my messaging, is that I am a strategic marketer, former director of marketing, who actually also has these skills. That definitely is key to my communication, I think.
And if we were to go back and talk about the social media aspect of it, which you've not sort of focused on specifically at this moment, but you have plans to with your new recruit, you're talking about that. Exactly. Is what frustrates you with that industry? You talked about it. There's too many people that think they can do it, but what?
I think social media is a very, very, very challenging role for anybody, because it's so fast paced and it's actually quite negative for our mental health. So in terms of what works on the platform, it might be just because it gets people to watch it or share it. And it's all about retention rates and being kind of addictive behavior on Instagram specifically, and TikTok. It's all about kind of, being quite extreme, making you feel angry or sad or laughing or whatever it is, because it makes you watch it and share it with your friends. So there's a lot of kind of outrage content just to get people sharing it with a horrible comment because they're angry at what they've just read. And as a social media marketer, you're having to look at that content all day and compete with it all day. And then, you might be talking to a brand who's a luxury travel company, for example, who can't make content. I mean, they can make addictive, fun content of beautiful coral reefs and things, but they are competing with some quite interesting algorithms. And that's quite challenging. And also, I think within social media, you've got people who are very good at writing copy and scheduling content, and that's quite an admin heavy role. And then you've got people who are strategic or can make reels and videos and beautiful photography, and that's a very creative role. And then you've got someone who can measure results and look at the algorithm, and they're quite data centric and quite technical. And nobody's going to have 3 people in their social media team unless you're a massive company. And so it's just a very challenging role with a lot to it, I would say.
Wow. I've learned a lot already just in this last 5 minutes of
conversation. And that doesn't even include paid advertising as well, which is a whole nother arm of social media.
Yes. And you talk about outraging content or trigger marketing in terms of doing that. That's what, trying to trigger people into an action just to get some data and information about them, I presume, in terms of what they're after.
Well, I think the platforms compete with each other. So Instagram and TikTok very competitive with each other, which is why Instagram Reels are so prominent right now, because they're competing with TikTok, which is video only. And so that means that everything else won't get as much exposure, which forces brands to be creating constant video content, which is very expensive, very time consuming, and demotivating when they've got this amazing content that doesn't get any exposure because it's not a video.
Right. Interesting. That's a very interesting way. So, right, let's move on a little bit in terms of our thinking, etc. So you've run the business now since 2001. Prior to that,
2021.
21. Apologies.
I don't know how old I was in 2001.
We'll redo that bit. No, that's fine. That's my error. And for For our listeners, I've just gone bright red. But anyway, so let's just pick out in terms of your journey up to that point, as well as the last year. You've talked about some of the failures, but what's some of the sort of key highlights over your working career so far and the last years of your business?
In terms of my career highlights, I would say working in luxury travel. So I worked for two of the biggest luxury travel companies, Abercrombie & Kent and Audley. And that was incredible marketing experience because they're very specific on their tone of voice. So they're a bit like John Lewis in their kind of marketing and their audience. And it's all very specific in terms of language and quality. And it held me to a really high standard. And so that really set the bar for everything I did after that point. So I'm really lucky that I started with such particular brands, I think. And then I think in cybersecurity, it's a very creative, which you wouldn't expect, but very creative, very explorative industry. They're always up for trying new things, always up for testing and taking risks. And that was an incredible contrast because it allowed me to step into being the role of a podcast producer with literally no experience and grow and, elevate my career in that way. So those are probably my highlights. And then my time as a director working for a luxury travel agency was actually short-lived because it was during the pandemic. It wasn't a good time for travel. And then obviously I've launched my business after that. So
let's think forwards 5 years now. So if we were to meet again in 5 years' time and we were to look back the last 5 years, what's going to happen professionally and personally for you to consider that a success?
Wow. Well, I would say my goal is to actually build an entire agency with a team of people. So I'd like to have a podcast specialist, a social media specialist, a videographer, photographer. And I would like to move into more of a strategic director role where I oversee everything, maybe even have an account manager who liaises with the clients. And I'd want to be hiring people with that kind of entrepreneurial mindset that I've got, where they'll try different skills, take risks, do different things. So that would be my goal, would be to hire a team of really sort of creative individuals to elevate the business.
And what would get in your way in terms of, do you think, over the next, what would have stopped you getting there if you haven't?
I think it would be fear of failure, because that's what stopped me so far in a lot of things. Because I am a marketer, I hold myself to a high standard, and something that I keep reading is that perfectionism stands in the way of progress. And I know that. So, for example, I could start my own podcast, but I don't because I'm a podcast producer. And so if it failed, it'd be really embarrassing. And I often don't put myself out there because I feel like people expect more from me. So I don't have that same leeway of failing. And so in terms of getting myself there, it will just be my own fear of taking the leap, I think.
Right. Well, that's something I'm sure you're tackling in terms of doing that. So do you, how are you going to overcome that? Have you had any thoughts in terms of what you're going to do?
I think just go for it. I mean, I follow a lot of business leaders in different areas on social media, and also I try and go to networking events, which is how we met. So I can connect with other people who are, 5 years ahead of me or 10 years ahead of me. And actually, even my new wealth manager or financial advisor, whatever you call them, is kind of 10 years ahead of where I want to be now. And I try and surround myself with people who've done it, because they basically tell me that they did fail and it was hard. And there were times when they didn't do well. And a lot of people who were their peers would have then gone back to work, but they didn't. They just carried on. And that's the only reason they are where they are. And I think that's really interesting advice, that it's, you've just got to do it and push through, and you might fail, but you've just got to keep going. So just surrounding myself with those people is how I try and overcome that fear of failure.
Excellent. And do you have any specific goals for this year?
For this year, my goal would be to relaunch my website, hopefully get some exciting clients in the podcast space, hire somebody to become a social media specialist to do the actual scheduling and running of accounts, so that when those leads come in, I can actually accept them. And I think once that happened, I'd then, have money to be able to invest into maybe hiring that person full-time or hiring more people beyond them full-time.
Well, it's been a fantastic conversation, Alice. Thank you very much in terms of that. Understanding, podcasting and the industry, the social media, your honesty with us in terms of your lost time at the start and some of the failures you've done, and some of the mistakes you've got over in terms of doing that, some of the insight you've given us in terms of the remote working can work in terms of doing things, and I love the description, the fact that you're a marketeer that does podcasting in terms of doing, really sort of stands out in terms of your capabilities and skills and how you can be different in the marketplace in terms of doing that. So thank you very much for this fantastic conversation. Got a few quick fire questions here at the end so just sort of first answers are the best answers, but in terms of see how it comes out. So if you were to go back to your younger you, before you even started work, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say try and work in an industry that you love. So I'm really interested in art, for example, and in galleries and things like that. And although I've worked in luxury travel, it's not exactly miles off. I think I would try and get into an industry which I actually am also really passionate about.
Brilliant. Thank you. What books would you recommend?
So I've just read the most amazing book, which is called Finding Me by Viola Davis. And it's incredible. I read it in 48 hours and then my mum did and then my sister did. We all devoured it and you need to read it.
Fabulous. I will definitely look that one up. Which podcasts do you listen to?
So I love a podcast by the BBC, which is called The Missing Crypto Queen. I've actually listened to the whole thing twice, and it's an investigative podcast about a woman who made a fake cryptocurrency and scammed millions and millions of people around the world, from small countries in Africa all the way to the US, gave talks at Wembley Stadium, and she was a fraudster and she's now missing, and it's a fantastic show.
Ah, yes, I know that story, but I didn't know there's a podcast on it. Wow, fantastic. Do you have any apps on your phone that you can't live without, both personal or business?
I would say for personal, it would be reading list, because I love reading. So I read about 2 books a month, and I have books surrounding me all the time. And this helps me categorize what I've read, if I liked it, what I've got to read, what I've got to buy, because I'm definitely a book person.
And for your business, any apps that are really beneficial for you?
To be honest, I think it would just be my calendar. I color code my calendar.
Okay. Who would you class has had most influence on you? Any leaders in history or time that have the most influence on you?
If we say in terms of my business, it would probably be my sister, who lives in Australia, because of the time difference. Quite often at like 11 p.m. when I'm still working, she's just getting up for work. And she's been a really good sounding board for me, because she's kind of detached in terms of obviously geographically, but she's been a really good support of bouncing ideas off. And I can be really frank with her because she doesn't know anybody that I'm working with. And so she's given me some really great advice.
Excellent. To date, what's been your most successful marketing tactic or lead generation?
I would say when I worked at Audley Travel, we did a campaign, which was a user-generated campaign, which means getting their existing customers to share photos from their travels. And they are people who have already traveled with Audley, so they're really valuable to the company. And that kind of meant that people who had never traveled with Audley couldn't enter without specifically saying that. And what it was on Instagram, we asked them to share their favorite memory of their holiday, use a specific brand hashtag for the chance to win a all-in massive luxury holiday with Audley. And we got, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was maybe over 100,000 entries. I can't remember though. It may not have been that high, but it was a huge amount of entries. And this is all these Audley travelers recommending the brand by basically sharing their incredible moments with the brand. And it turned into a massive lead generation sort of advertising opportunity, because who better to recommend your brand than your existing customers? And the content was beautiful. And I was really proud of that campaign.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And finally, how can people get hold of you?
So get hold of me at alicevioletcreative.com, or you can email me at info@alicevioletcreative.com. I am on Instagram. I've only just started posting again, so you can have a look at my recent photo shoot I just shared a video of today, which is just Alice Violet Creative. And yeah, no matter what your brand is, if you need podcasts, social media, content, or a strategic marketer, do get in touch.
Alice, thank you very much for our conversation today. It has been really interesting and some fascinating insights into the world of podcasting and social media and the development of your business. And I wish you lots of success for the future.
Thanks for having me.
Don't forget to take a look at www.bizsmarts.co.uk to access a great range of resources to help you in your scale-up journey. So that's bizsmarts.co.uk, which is bizsmarts.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.